welcome. You're watching Gravitas. My name is Priyanka Sharma. Here's our show for today. Is a war breaking out in the South China Sea? There has been a flare-up, a clash between China and the Philippines. Manila is calling it the most serious incident yet. It is accusing China of deliberately escalating tensions in the high seas. Just take a look at what's happening. A Chinese Coast Guard vessel has collided with its Philippine counterpart. In the video, you can also see that the Chinese vessel goes on to shadow the Philippine ship. Here's another video of that collision. Take a look. This happened in the South China Sea. On the 5th of March, a little after dawn, the Philippine Coast Guard vessel suffered some structural damage from that collision. But the Chinese weren't done. Around an hour later, there was another flare-up. The Chinese attacked a Philippine supply vessel. It was blocked and harassed by the Chinese Coast Guard and the Chinese maritime militia. The boat was then water-cannoned. Its windshield was shattered and its crew grounded. Now, the Philippine South China Sea Task Force claims a top admiral was on board this vessel when it was attacked by the Chinese Coast Guard. He was unharmed. In this video, you can see the two vessels colliding. That's the moment of impact.
Medyo nag-vibrate yun.
There were some vibrations, and as you can see, the glass shattered. It was loud. It's a good thing they didn't continue using the water cannon further and they pulled back.
Buti lang hindi nila tinuloy, nag-pull back na.
It's important to note that all of this was happening near the second Thomas Shoal. This Philippine boat was carrying supplies for troops stationed at the shoal. Reuters claims that its reporter was on board one of the Philippine vessels and was witness to the Chinese aggression. Reuters reports it witnessed, and I'm quoting here, several close encounters between the Philippines and the Chinese Coast Guard vessels, which eventually led to a collision and the Chinese Coast Guard using water cannon at one of the Philippine supply boat. Now, here's another video of that attack on the Philippine vessel. The Philippines says the Chinese vessel sailed towards its boat. It made dangerous maneuvers, and that led to that collision. What does China have to say to its defense? The Chinese Coast Guard claims it was only taking what it calls control measures against quote-unquote illegal intrusion by the Philippine ships. What does this mean? The second Thomas Shoal is some 1,300 kilometers from the Chinese mainland. It is, in fact, within the Philippine EEZ, barely 190 kilometers from the island of Palawan. But this has not stopped China from staking claim on this reef. In fact, China claims almost all of the South China Sea, including the exclusive economic zones of the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and Indonesia. What's the basis of this bizarre Chinese claim? Beijing's so-called 9-dash line, which, by the way, has recently become a 10-dash line. These imaginary dashes are meant to justify China's exceptionalism, to defend its maritime aggression and territorialism. There's no other way to put it. All these tactics explain why China believes, and wrongly so, that its recent violence in the South China Sea was restrained.
The Chinese Coast Guard responded to the Philippines' infringement and provocation at the Renai Shoal in accordance with the law and took necessary enforcement measures that were legitimate, legal, professional, restrained and beyond reproach. In this incident, who was initiating the provocation, who violated international law and endangered peace and stability in the South China Sea? The truth is clear.
The truth, the Philippines says, is that Chinese actions were quote-unquote patently illegal and downright uncivilized. The Philippines summoned China's deputy chief of mission in Manila in protest against Chinese aggression, but China is pointing the finger at the United States. Beijing claims that the US is using the Philippines as a pawn to stir up tensions in the South China Sea. The Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning has a piece of advice for Manila. The Philippines should not let itself be at the mercy of the United States. I don't know how many of you know this, but Manila and Washington have a mutual defense treaty. This treaty says the two countries must defend each other if attacked, which also means incidents like these, flare-ups like these, raise the chances of an American involvement in the South China Sea. The Pentagon is already criticizing Beijing for putting lives at risk. This is the Pentagon spokesperson, Pat Ryder.
The United States is going to continue to stand by our Philippine ally, and our commitment to our mutual defense treaty is ironclad.
How many more collisions and water cannon incidents before a US warship or an American warplane intervenes? And how quickly will things escalate once that happens? Is China simply testing the waters? Is it testing the limits? Clearly, there are a lot of questions at these points, and can you blame me for asking these? The South China Sea is one of the most militarized waters on this planet. It has been witness to too many conflicts so far. Let me recount them. In 1974, China seized the Paracel Island from Vietnam. 70 Vietnamese troops died. In 1988, Vietnam and China fought over the Spratly Islands. Vietnam lost 60 sailors. In 2020, China and the Philippines engaged in a standoff. Both countries accuse the other of intrusions in the Scarborough Shoal. There are way too many players in the South China Sea, and they are all just one flare-up away from a full-fledged war. Question is, will the latest confrontation be that trigger? You know what? The last thing the world needs right now is another war. Gaza is still burning, as is Ukraine. The war in the Red Sea has gone underwater. It has cut internet connections around the world. Look at what Manila is saying. It claims China is deliberately stirring up trouble in the South China Sea. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations has called for restraint in the South China Sea. The ASEAN members were meeting in Melbourne to mark the 50th anniversary of Melbourne's association with the bloc. A joint statement by ASEAN read, and I'm quoting again, "We recognize the benefits of having the South China Sea as a sea of peace, stability, and prosperity. We encourage all countries to avoid any unilateral actions that endanger peace, security, and stability in the region." In Manila, a free climber scaled a 47-story tower. This was his way of showing support for the Philippines' claims over the second Thomas Shoal. Australia says it is concerned about what's happening in the South China Sea. Clearly, this is not just any other flare-up in the South China Sea at the moment. This is a high-stakes confrontation. It is polarizing, and it definitely has the potential to escalate. What happens next is anybody's guess. The Indian Navy has done it yet again. It has exhibited its bravery and military prowess on the global front. As the Houthis continue to spread terror in the Red Sea, the Indian Navy has saved the day. On the 4th of March, the Houthis targeted a Liberian-flagged vessel in the Gulf of Aden. The vessel was some 90 nautical miles southeast of Aden. It carried 23 crew members. 13 of them were Indians. The missile attack set the vessel on fire. The lives of the crew members were in danger. It was a race against time. The rescuers had a very small window before the fire engulfed the vessel, or the sea devoured it. Fortunately, the INS Kolkata was in the region for maritime security operations. As soon as it learnt of the attack, it promptly arrived on scene. Take a look. Aboard this were 12 personnel who specialized in firefighting. The team fought the fire on the vessel through dawn. And soon, a specialist explosive ordnance disposal team also joined in. It assessed the residual risks after the fire was tamed. Finally, the vessel was escorted to safe waters. All 23 of the crew members were alive and safe. This isn't the first time the Indian Navy has come to rescue. Last month, the Houthis attacked a merchant vessel Islander with a drone. A member of its crew was injured. This was again in the Gulf of Aden. An Indian warship responded to a distress call and rushed to the vessel's aid. An explosive disposal team inspected for further risks, while the medical team treated the injured crew member. One after another, the Indian Navy has been showcasing its unwavering commitment to ensure the safety and security in the strategically vital waterway. It is establishing itself as a first responder in the southern Red Sea. The Houthis have been attacking vessels in the Red Sea left, right and center. It has been going on since November. And from what it looks like, it's going to continue for months ahead. In the face of that, the Indian Navy has been taking decisive steps to safeguard its interests in the Red Sea. Because you see, it is not only the Houthis who are plaguing the Red Sea right now. It is also the Somali pirates who have made a dramatic comeback after nearly a decade. Since November, there have been as many as 8 hijacking attempts in the region. One of them was successful. Nearly 20 ships have been attacked, hijacked, boarded, or otherwise harassed in the waters of the Gulf of Aden. It has only been a year since major shipping bodies removed the piracy high-risk designation from the area, and now the pirates are back to prove otherwise. To take a hold of the growing menace, the Indian Navy has deployed a large naval flotilla in and around the area of conflict. It consists of 12 warships. 2 of them are deployed in the Gulf of Aden. The remaining 10 are in the northern and western Arabian Sea. Together, they monitor nearly 4 million square kilometers. This exceeds the current naval presence of any other country. This also highlights the growing confidence within the Indian Navy's leadership and its capabilities. India's security stance is expanding, and it seems to be a result of direction and clarity of purpose among the top brass. It is also a message for China that India is willing to contest any challenge to assert dominance in the wider Indian Ocean region. Is America losing the arms race to China and Russia? The simple answer to that question is yes. China and Russia are outpacing the United States and its allies in the new arms race. Gone are the days of arms control. Over the past few decades, key treaties that helped keep the world safe have collapsed, one after the other. The era of arms control effectively came to an end when Russia suspended its participation in the New START treaty. Meanwhile, China, which refuses to be a part of any kind of dialogue on arms control and is displaying an increasingly aggressive behavior in the Indo-Pacific, is now rapidly building up its conventional and nuclear forces. Are America and its allies prepared? There's a lot at stake. There's lots to worry about. Recently, a high-ranking defense official from Australia warned the West of the imminent threats in the Indo-Pacific region. On Monday, Australia's Deputy Defence Secretary for Strategy, Hugh Jeffrey, said that Australia and the US need to boost their industrial cooperation so that they can be better prepared to face these threats. He said, and I quote, Russia and China are outpacing the US and its allies. Our ability to co-innovate, co-invest and co-produce defense technology today will determine who wins the battle for military advantage tomorrow. You see, for some time now, the US and its allies have known one thing. The military-industrial architecture developed during the Cold War is not just adequate to address the challenges of today. The Australian official thought to remind them of just that fact. Jeffrey said that AUKUS will play a pivotal role in securing the Indo-Pacific region. Let me remind you, AUKUS is a trilateral security partnership between Australia, the United Kingdom and the United States. Among other things, AUKUS gives Australia's defence arm the ability to build nuclear submarines in what many assume is an effort to keep a lid on the Chinese Navy in the South China Sea. The Australian official says that AUKUS can challenge China, but the reality is that the trilateral partnership faces several challenges. For starters, the alliance, which was announced in 2021, is yet to be fully adopted. Moreover, the nuclear-powered submarines announced as part of the AUKUS Pact will reportedly take decades to deliver. AUKUS's loss is China's gain. We already know the era of total American submarine dominance is ending. China continues to and has significantly expanded its fleet of subs. Beijing is producing a new generation of nuclear-armed submarines that, for the first time, are expected to pose a challenge to growing US and allied efforts to track them. Analysts warn that China is on track to have its Type 096 ballistic missile submarine operational before the end of the decade. Just look at the timeline here. Breakthroughs in the quietness of these submarines are aided in part by Russian technology. Analysts predict that these new Chinese submarines that are going to be very, very hard to detect. The Type 096s are going to be a nightmare for America and its allies. What's more, the Pentagon says the Chinese Navy is routinely staging fully armed nuclear deterrence patrols in the South China Sea. It is similar to patrols operated by the US, Britain, Russia and France in the past. Sure, the US has taken several steps recently to boost its readiness in the region. It is training with international allies and partners. It is one of the core drivers of America's increased deployments and contingency planning in the Indo-Pacific region. The piled strain on the resources of the US and allies, all this shows that China has improved in many areas, including logistics, command and control, weapons. They show how China has started operating its ballistic missile submarines in the same way that the US, Russia, Britain and France have for decades now. China's deterrence patrols allow them to threaten a nuclear counterattack, even if land-based missiles and systems are completely destroyed. The new Chinese subs are also being equipped with a third-generation missile, the JL-3. It has an estimated range of more than 10,000 kilometers. It has the ability to carry multiple warheads. And more importantly, it gives China the ability to reach continental US from Chinese coastal waters for the first time. What's more, China plans to boost its military spending by 7.2%. This year, as Chinese President Xi Jinping stays the course on his campaign to modernize the armed forces, China's more than 20 years of continuous increases in defense budgeting have featured a broad military upgrade effort to include sophisticated new weaponry and cyber capabilities, much of which is focused on challenging America's power. After spending the past few decades on extensive research and development, China's production of missiles, fighter jets, warships and submarines has now moved into higher gear. We all know what that means. It means that for the first time, the US has to contend with two nuclear adversaries, Russia and China. More adversaries means more trouble. Can America take on both? Sure, it has the ally support, but most of them have big issues, rather bigger issues, that they need to contend with as of now. Take the UK, for example. The UK's recent Trident missile test failures have raised questions about Britain's nuclear deterrent as well as its ability to deliver on its promises to AUKUS. Already, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has revealed Moscow's ability to batter its neighbors in Europe while using the threat of nuclear war to keep the US at bay. Russian troops may have been brutal in Ukraine, but its conventional and nuclear capabilities paired with President Putin's aggressive behavior is and will continue to threaten NATO for years to come. But Europe is dealing with bigger problems than Ukraine. It is a divided house when it comes to strategy. There are continuing shortfalls in weapons production. It is scraping at the bottom of the barrel for weapons. In case Russia attacks, which is their big fear, can America deal with it all alone? But you see, it's not just the arms race that haunts NATO. Sometimes all it takes to risk the security of an intergovernmental military alliance is some good old flirting. You heard me right. In the US, an Air Force employee recently fell victim to this age-old spy trick. 63-year-old David Franklin Slater, who held a top-secret security clearance at the US Strategic Command, has been indicted by the US Justice Department last weekend. His crime? Leaking sensitive and classified information about Russia's war in Ukraine to his secret informant, Love. The veteran has pleaded not guilty on claims he provided this woman with classified info. As per the indictment, Slater began working at the U.S. Strategic Command in Nebraska between August 2021 and April 2022. In February of 2022, right after Russia sent troops to Ukraine, Slater was given access to classified information. He was given access to briefings regarding Russia's war against Ukraine. As part of his work, he was given access to information labeled top secret or sensitive. For the unversed, this is the highest level classification of information in the US government. Prosecutors say around this time, Slater was emailing and messaging a woman who kept asking him for information from his job. Prosecutors say that Slater later provided her with this information. Last Saturday, Slater was taken into custody. He has been charged with 1 count of conspiracy to disclose national defense information and 2 counts of unauthorized disclosure of national defense information. A press release from the DOJ says that Slater knowingly transmitted classified national defense information to another person in blatant disregard for the security of his country. In messages revealed in the court documents, the unidentified woman called Slater her secret informant, Love, her secret agent. She would regularly ask Slater about US actions related to the war in Ukraine. One message from April 14th in 2022 read, "My sweet Dave, thanks for the valuable information. It's great that 2 officials from the USA are going to Kyiv." Let me now read out another message from April 19th, 2022. "Dave, I hope tomorrow NATO will prepare a very unpleasant surprise for Putin. Will you tell me?" Not only that, the woman also asked him to verify news reports about the war. She would inquire about the special room where Slater worked. Take a look. Answering these questions has cost Slater dearly. Prosecutors say he provided classified information regarding military targets in Russia's war against Ukraine. Slater could face a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison, 3 years of supervised release, and a fine of up to $250,000 for each charge. Have you seen what's happening in Bengaluru? It's shocking. This is a metropolitan city with a population of more than 13 million people. Guess what? India's very own Silicon Valley has run out of water. Why? What has caused this massive, crippling water crisis in this IT hub? Well, it depends on whom you ask. One reason is a complete disregard for the city's natural water bodies. Another is the failure of the monsoon season in Karnataka. There simply hasn't been enough rain, and the city's water reservoirs can't keep up with its demand for more. Rapid urbanization, poor infrastructure, bad habits have all added to this drought. The water levels in the all-important Kaveri River have dropped. This shortage doesn't just affect drinking water, it also impacts irrigation. It's a wake-up call for Bengaluru and to a certain extent for all of us. To say that this water crisis is grave would be an understatement. Let me give you some examples, rather some anecdotal experiences which we can all relate to. Residents have stopped washing their cars and balconies to save water. They're bathing with half a bucket of water instead of indulging in an hour-long shower to save water. Their clothes are being washed in the economy cycle of the washing machine because it saves water. And if you're going to the washroom, you'll have to settle for a half flush because there's no water. There's more. Bore wells have dried up. Residents are using wastewater from their water filters to mop floors and bathrooms. Water management bodies have been instructed to take charge of all irrigation and commercial bore wells in the city. There's a clear mandate. Water does not belong to individuals. If it doesn't rain soon, things are going to go from bad to worse. Let me remind you, this is Bengaluru we're talking about, a favorite spot for venture capitalists, Asia's tech hub just behind Beijing. Home to startups, MSMEs. What happens when the taps run dry? Well, businesses bleed. The cost of procuring water has gone up. That is driving up production costs for industries. Take the case of home cleaning products. Their costs have gone up by 10% due to this water crisis. Textiles, chemicals, paper manufacturers, they have all similar stories to share. But in the end, it's the common man in Bengaluru who is paying the price. The price of water tankers in the city has skyrocketed. Rates are likely to double during peak summer months coming up. Remember, an estimate says 20% of Bangaloreans depend on private tanker operators for drinking water. Think of it like this. Earlier, a 1,000-litre water tanker cost between 600 and 800 rupees. Today, it's more than 2,000 rupees. So this inflated cost will be a huge blow for residents. And for those in luxury high-rises, the water crisis has brought unheard-of inconveniences. They're being advised to use disposable plates and wet wipes to save water. Like I said, Bengaluru's water crisis is a wake-up call. Ironically, it's like a splash of cold water in all our faces. You see, no amount of wet wipes, no eco mode in a washing machine, no wastewater will quench our thirst unless we're prudent with how we use water. Think about that next time you take that long shower. Do you think you're doing the environment a favor by driving an electric vehicle? You might want to think again. Electric vehicles were designed solely to tackle climate change. Weren't they supposed to shift away from fossil fuels to control carbon emissions? More and more people turn to EVs owing to growing awareness. In fact, governments also announced complete transition goals. They included EVs in their climate policies. They were supposed to be the solution to our climate troubles. But what I'm about to show you, is the exact opposite of that. Why so? Because these electric vehicles are doing more harm than good. A study has found that they are causing more pollution than your average petrol and diesel cars. Imagine that. It's a bit difficult to digest, isn't it? Hold that thought. Our next report tells you more.
Just because an electric car doesn't have a tailpipe doesn't really mean it is a zero-emission vehicle. As it turns out, most of the particulate matter released by a vehicle doesn't come from the tailpipe at all. It is released by tire wear. And both EVs and regular vehicles have that in common. As you know, cars are heavy. As their tires rub against the road, they degrade. This leads to the release of tiny and often toxic particles. According to measurements by an emission analytics firm, in gasoline cars, airborne tire wear emissions are 400 times greater than direct exhaust particulate emissions. So the tailpipe is not to blame. Coming to electric vehicles, generating the electricity that powers them creates particulate pollution. Their tires are made from petroleum. They weigh far more than gasoline-powered cars, 15 to 30% to be specific. So their tires degrade faster and release even more particulate matter. How much more? Up to 1,850 times more than that of exhaust. Now experts are counting on EV makers to reduce the weight of their cars. But how would that be possible? As manufacturers work to develop better EVs, the battery size is only expected to increase. So will the weight, and also the tire wear, and along with that, the particulate emissions. In a bid to control the airborne particles like dust, dirt, and soot, California wants to ban the sale of new gasoline-powered cars, and it wants to do it by the year 2035. But will that be the most efficient decision? Because new gasoline cars are quite clean, as per the Environmental Protection Agency. Cars emit only about 1% of all direct fine particulate matter in California. And most of these emissions come from older models, not the new ones that California wants to ban. The newer ones, in fact, have particulate filters that significantly reduce emissions. So how will banning petrol or diesel cars be the solution when the focus should be on the tires instead? What could possibly be the solution? To make EVs lighter or to have sturdier tires? Perhaps the jury is out there. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Did you face trouble logging into your Facebook or Instagram account last night? Because you weren't alone. It was a technical glitch at the Facebook headquarters. Thousands of users globally were booted out of their accounts for nearly 2 hours. At the peak of the outage, there were more than 550,000 reports of disruptions for Facebook and about 92,000 for Instagram. The White House National Security Council, which was monitoring the incident, said that it was not aware of any specific malicious cyber activity for the outage. But what does such an outage cost Mark Zuckerberg and the company? Well, it cost approximately $100 million in revenue. That is rupees 832 crore. That estimation has been given by Dan Ives, managing director at New York's Wedbush Securities. He told tabloid Daily Mail that it is unlikely that the company will reveal just how much the outage impacted them economically, but it is a negligible amount of revenue, likely below $100 million. Nonetheless, the outage at Meta is a costly mistake for Meta. Shortly after disruptions began being reported, Meta's share price dropped by 1.5%. This equates to $18 billion or rupees 1.49 lakh crore. Since then, it has fallen by a total of 1.6%. This isn't the first time that Meta has faced such an outage. Some experts also use the 2021 outage as a reference point to calculate the loss incurred by Meta. In October of that year, Meta's Facebook and WhatsApp had suffered a similar outage. It reportedly cost the company $100 million in revenue, but that estimation was based on Facebook's second quarter earnings. Today, Facebook charges a bit more for advertising, so one shouldn't be surprised if Meta incurs higher losses from the outage. Then in October 2022, Meta's WhatsApp, one of the world's largest messaging apps, also went down for a few hours. Around 2.9 million users were affected at the time. Then too, the company had blamed it on a technical problem. As shares went down today, Meta remained mum about what the technical problem was. The company has about 3.19 billion daily active users across its family of apps, which also includes Threads, which many see as an alternative to X, formerly Twitter. The outage was among the top trending topics on X, as a matter of fact. The platform's owner, Elon Musk, also took a shot at Meta with a post that said, "If you're reading this post, it's because our servers are working." But let's not forget, X itself has faced several disruptions to its service after Musk bought the social media giant in 2022. An outage in December caused issues for more than 77,000 users in countries from the US to France. Talk. That's the clock ticking on TikTok. If American lawmakers are to have their way, TikTok will soon be put on a deadline. Either it severs all ties with the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese company ByteDance, or it loses the access to the American market. You see, a group of American lawmakers have introduced a bill. This bill gives ByteDance about 6 months to divest TikTok, or the app is taken off the App Store in America. In case you don't know, ByteDance owns TikTok. ByteDance was founded in 2012 by one Chinese entrepreneur, Zhang Yiming. The company is based in Beijing, but registered in the Cayman Islands, which isn't so uncommon for Chinese companies. Today, ByteDance is valued at around $200 billion. Imagine that. TikTok does not have any headquarters in Beijing. In fact, it has 2 headquarters. One in Singapore, another in Los Angeles. Take a look. But here's the thing, reports say that all of TikTok's decisions are reportedly made in Beijing in the office of ByteDance. Even TikTok's executives are appointed from Beijing. But if you ask TikTok, it will reject all such claims. In fact, TikTok's website has an elaborate page on what it calls myth versus fact. It claims that today 60% of ByteDance is owned by global institutional investors and an additional 20% is owned by ByteDance employees around the world. The remaining 20% of ByteDance, the company claims, is owned by its founder, who quote-unquote is not part of any state or government entity. Quick question. How much of what ByteDance says can you trust? This company, after all, is Chinese. And guess what? China's 2017 National Intelligence Law states, it says that Chinese companies must assist or cooperate with state intelligence work. The details and extent of this cooperation is unknown. What we do know is that a separate 2014 counter-espionage law says that Chinese organizations cannot refuse to collect evidence for an investigation. You see, as long as you are operating out of China, you are bound to abide by the demands of the Chinese Communist Party. If the CCP wants you to collect data, you collect data. If it wants you to spy, you spy. No questions asked. Because if you dare to question, your company stands to fall down the cliff. Ask Alibaba founder Jack Ma. He will tell you what it's like to get into the wrong books of the Chinese Communist Party. Anyway, coming back to TikTok and ByteDance, where is the guarantee that the Chinese Communist Party can't access all user information? Which is why India banned TikTok back in 2020. New Delhi was very clear that this app is a security threat. Partial or complete bans are also in place in 23 countries. The list includes Australia, France, Estonia, the United Kingdom, Belgium, Nepal, Ireland, and Denmark. The Netherlands also. Now, to name a few, will the US be next to ban TikTok? That's the question. Currently, America's federal employees are barred from using TikTok on government devices. There are more than 150 TikTok users in America. TikTok swears that data of American users will only be stored in America. They will be on servers of Oracle, but American lawmakers clearly remain suspicious of this Chinese export. Earlier this year, the TikTok CEO, Shoal, was grilled during a Senate hearing. He was repeatedly asked whether he was in any way connected to the Chinese Communist Party. Just watch.
You said today, as you often say, that you live in Singapore. Of what nation are you a citizen?
Singapore.
Are you a citizen of any other nation?
No, Senator.
Have you ever applied for Chinese citizenship?
Senator, I served my nation in Singapore. No, I did not.
Do you have a Singaporean passport?
Yes, and I served my military for two and a half years in Singapore.
Do you have any other passports from any other nations?
No, Senator.
Your wife is an American citizen. Your children are American citizens.
That's correct.
Have you ever applied for American citizenship?
No, not yet.
Have you ever been a member of the Chinese Communist Party?
Senator, I'm Singaporean. No.
Have you ever been associated or affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party?
No, Senator. Again, I'm Singaporean.
American lawmakers say that the new bill will quote-unquote prevent foreign adversaries such as China from surveying and manipulating the American people. But here's the thing. The move to ban TikTok may not be all that simple. For starters, this is an election year in America, and TikTok is a pretty popular app. Will the Biden administration risk banning TikTok in the lead-up to Election Day? Also, consider this. Joe Biden's election campaign has recently joined TikTok. In 2020, then President and now presidential hopeful Donald Trump tried banning TikTok, but his efforts were blocked up by U.S. courts. The story is clearly also a political one, and how it pans out will be quite interesting to watch. Surely Beijing is already hooked to the TikTok in America saga. Right, I'd just like to inform all our viewers that we have some breaking news coming in at this hour. Nikki Haley has dropped out of the presidential race in the United States. The former South Carolina governor has suspended her presidential campaign. This is the latest update coming in. What this means essentially is that Donald Trump will win the Republican nomination and once again face Democratic President Joe Biden in the run-up to November in the election. Haley, who ended her campaign in a speech to supporters in Charleston, has congratulated Donald Trump. Haley lasted longer than any other Republican challenger to Trump, but never posed a serious threat to the former president. And to discuss what this means for the presidential race, joining me now is my colleague and our correspondent Susan Teherani. Susan, thanks for joining us. This is a big announcement coming in from the US and Nikki Haley dropping out. Tell us what this means.
Yeah, well, everyone agreed almost that Nikki Haley really didn't have a path to victory, and it was sort of an enigma why she continued staying in the race. While she does represent a branch of the Republican Party that some are for, she's more traditional, and the Republican Party's face right now is very populist, and they've really rallied around Donald Trump. Moving forward, as you mentioned, both Joe Biden and Donald Trump are the presumed candidates moving forward. We're not going to expect many surprises. It's probably going to be one of the longest general elections in American history, unless, for example, because of Biden's age, something happens or moving forward, something unexpected like that. But I think the next big events will be the conventions of the Democrat and Republican parties in the summer. For Nikki Haley, it's not yet clear, what her path is for her political future. But what's important is to see whether or not her supporters will rally around Donald Trump, considering the fact that she did not outright endorse him. And considering the fact that those that were supporting him were looking for an alternative to the former president. Again, if it comes down to Donald Trump and Joe Biden, will each party really vote for their candidates, or will there be protest votes and people will sit out? And the main question is whether or not Donald Trump will need Nikki Haley's supporters to succeed in a general.
Right. Susan, you mentioned that this was not a big surprise. What are political pundits in America saying, as we understand that she was Donald Trump's final rival in the race? She hasn't endorsed the former president, but she has congratulated him. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, she really didn't win any delegates. She did stay in the race, and that was because she had donors that were never Trumpers that decided to back her, and some of her donors were from the Democratic Party. But when push would come to shove, ultimately, let's assume that she would become the nominee. The Democrats wouldn't continue supporting her, obviously. A lot of pundits think she was a better bet for Joe Biden to defeat than the former president. She did not endorse Donald Trump. She said that he should win the voters himself. Again, that's the question, whether or not her endorsement will mean anything in the generals. We'll have to wait to see what the polls say. But I think what was interesting was that immediately after she dropped out, President Biden put out a statement and said, obviously, Donald Trump and his campaign don't want your support, calling on her supporters. And he said that there is always a place in our campaign and in our party for your vote. But then the former president also put out a statement and said that, she got massively defeated. But he also called on Haley supporters to join his campaign as well.
Right, Susan, thank you so much for all those updates. And before moving on, let's show our viewers what Nikki Haley said right before dropping out of the presidential campaign.
In all likelihood, Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee when our party convention meets in July. I congratulate him and wish him well. I wish anyone well who would be America's president.
It seems Japan's Kyoto city has had enough. It has decided to ban tourists from its popular geisha district. And why is that? Because tourists have been behaving out of line. For those unversed, geisha are Japan's famous professional entertainers. This is what they look like. They are known for their trademark kimonos and white faces. They are excellent conversationalists and hosts. They entertain their clients with traditional Japanese performing arts styles, be it dance, music, or singing. The historic WION district of Kyoto is home to the geisha. And because of that very reason, it is also a hub for tourists. It is thronged by hundreds of thousands of people who come to get a glimpse of these graceful Japanese artists. But as it turns out, these tourists lack grace themselves. They seek to photograph a geisha, but have been harassing them along the way. The rise of geisha paparazzi has made it very difficult for the traditional artists. They have been chased down the streets, blocked by crowds of paps, photographed without their consent. Often forced to pose for pictures, tourists have even tugged at their kimonos and touched the delicate ornaments in the artist's hair. The disrespect is astounding. And Kyoto doesn't want any more of it. Starting next month, the small alleys of this district will now be completely shut for tourists. They will only be open for the geisha, their clients and residents of the district. It sounds brutal, but it's only fair. For years, the geisha paparazzi has been making the artists' lives difficult. It boiled over in 2019 when misbehaving tourists pulled out geisha's hair ornaments and even hit them with cigarette butts. The district began putting up signs and notices prohibiting any kind of photography and introducing a fine even. Signs in multiple languages explain that geisha photography is not allowed without a permit. The violators could be charged up to 10,000 yen, which is $67. But it did not. The relationship simply isn't working out, and that visitors are the problem. You see, every spring break, people rush to Miami Beach. There is overcrowding, violence, drug activity. For the last 3 years, this has become the norm. Despite strong police presence and even curfews, visitors still manage to wreak havoc. Now, just ahead of the spring break, Miami Beach officials are implementing a month-long security measure. There will be parking restrictions, road closures, frequent back checks, early beach closures, DUI checkpoints, and arrests for drug possession and violence. You see, the menace has gone so out of hand that the authorities are willing to take a hit at their tourism and their economy, all to ensure that law and order is maintained.
On the next episode of World of Africa, Chad's interim president Mahamat Idris Deby Itno confirms his candidature in this year's long-awaited presidential race. His confirmation came at the end of a chaotic week in which opposition politician Yaya Dilo was killed in the capital N'Djamena. Gang violence in Haiti escalates. Residents flee capital Port-au-Prince as the besieged Prime Minister Ariel Henry was in Kenya signing an agreement allowing police deployment. And a Nigerian designer seeks to challenge norms with gender-fluid fashion. World of Africa, at these times, only on WION. World is One.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic